Hey mama, are you tired of feeling stressed and overwhelmed trying to grow your online business with your babies at home? You desire more flexibility in your day, allowing you to pour into your family, yourself, and your business without running yourself into the ground. Mama, you can build your dream business and do it in a way that fits your current season of life. And I'm going to show you exactly how. Welcome to the Mama Turned Mompreneur podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Singletary, daughter of the king, wife, mama of two, and life and business coach for mompreneurs. On this podcast, you will learn business strategies made for mamas just like you, who desire to be successful CEOs and fully present mamas without stress or overwhelm. So whether you're an entrepreneur who transitioned to a mompreneur or a mama turned mompreneur, I am here to support you. So grab your coffee, notebook, and pen, put in those earbuds, and let's dig in. Hey, mama. So today I'm going to be diving into, finding, I hate the word balance, but finding balance, finding that flow when you're showing up on multiple marketing platforms. And I wanted to talk about this because one, as a business owner, you need to be on more than one platform for your business. It's called omni-channel marketing, whatever you want to call it. Bottom line is that you need to have at least 2 to 3 platforms that you are showing up on for your business if you want to grow your business, if you want to sign clients. Like, building your business on a single platform is not going to cut it. But the thing is that as a mom, you have to figure out, okay, how do I make this work? How do I effectively show up on more than one platform in my business? So the first thing I want to say is that when it comes to, being on multiple platforms, you need to first figure out what your primary platforms are. So these are the platforms that you are committing to showing up on weekly. These are the platforms that you're going to essentially plan your content for first. For me, my primary platforms are my podcast and email. These are the platforms where you will see me showing up every single week, no matter what. I do not miss a podcast episode. I do not miss a weekly email. Like, you will always see me showing up on these platforms. And the platform that I plan for first is my podcast. And I honestly believe that one of your primary platforms needs to be long form content, whether that's a podcast, YouTube, blog. You have to have long form content, especially going into 2025. Like I said in last week's episode, buying habits are changing. The buyer cycle is getting longer. People need more touch points and they need deeper connections. They need more you, getting to know the real you, really getting to know you so that they can trust you. And long form content helps with that. It helps so much. Think about it. You tune into my podcast each week. I'm literally in your ears each week. We are building that connection. You get to know the real me. You get to know my personality. You get to know my values, my likes, and different things. You get to decide based on the information I'm sharing in my podcast content whether or not I'm someone you actually want to work with. I am someone you want to invest in, so you can get the support that you need. That's what long form content does for you. Social media content is not doing that for you. And the reason why is that, one, the algorithm be algorithming. I don't care what other people say, but it's not pushing out your content to all of your followers. The other thing is that a lot of people are burnt out on social media, like the constant scrolling. People want to be more present, and social media doesn't support that. It's so easy to get caught up in the endless scrolling. And so people are not seeing your content, or you're having to churn out so much content so that people actually see one piece of content from you and whatnot. So you need to have long form content as part of one of your primary marketing platforms, also because it's evergreen content. people will find your podcast or your blog or your YouTube weeks, months, years after it's gone live. I recently have been going through my old podcast episodes and show notes and optimizing them more for SEO, because when I first started this podcast, I didn't know what SEO was. I wasn't even thinking about SEO, wasn't even on my radar. And literally, the few episodes I've changed so far, I've seen an increase in downloads. I've seen more traffic to my website because I optimized the show notes too, which are housed on my website. Literally, those episodes, these are 2 years ago, I published these episodes. They're getting traffic again. That is the power of long form content. Even if you don't start off right, you can always go back and optimize it. Like I said, you need to have your primary platforms. You need to be clear on what those are. So, like I said, for me, my primary platforms are my podcast and my email. I will put in collaborations too. The thing is that with collaborations, I'm not doing collaborations every single week. So, although it is kind of like a primary part of my marketing, it's not, I wouldn't say it's like a primary platform in the sense that I'm not doing collaborations weekly. I do roughly 2 to 3 collaborations per month, sometimes a little bit more, but on average, it's about 2 to 3 collaborations per month, whether it's a podcast interview, a bundle, or a speaking engagement. Now, you can have, other platforms too. Like, my biggest thing is that it's just you really need to be clear on those primary platforms, because essentially this is where you're going to start with. So, like I said, I start with planning my podcast content. So each month that I am planning content for, I start with my podcast. I look at what my goals are for the month and how my podcast is going to support that. And this is something I'm actually going to be teaching inside of the Social Detox Accelerator. Your primary platforms need to be part of your goals. So, like, as you're setting goals for the month, figuring out which offers you're trying to fill slots in. If you're launching a new offer, your content planning needs to be part of that. You need to be looking at how your content is going to support with you achieving those goals. So I start with my goals and then I plan my podcast content. From the podcast content, I plan my email content. So I will repurpose from the podcast, because each week I have a podcast specific email that goes out. Essentially, I break down one of the main points from that podcast episode, share about it in the email, and then refer them to the email to listen to the full episode. But I also look at other themes or other things that I speak about within that podcast content. Maybe I shared a specific story, or maybe there's another concept that I can dive deeper into. And so I pull those things out and repurpose it for email. I like to create this cohesiveness in my content, because one of the biggest things with messaging and for your messaging to be effective is that you essentially have to repeat yourself. People need to hear the same thing multiple times before they take action. Now, is it you literally saying the same thing over and over again? No, you find different ways to say it. So for me, that may be sharing a specific story, or that may be talking about another aspect of a specific concept. That's what I go to next. Like, when it's planning my email content, I look at, okay, how can I break apart this podcast episode even more? How can I connect it to my specific offers, or educate my audience on something, or help them have a mindset shift in a specific area, or make them aware of a specific problem. Maybe they think that this thing is their issue when in reality, it's this other thing that's going on. And so that's essentially like my process for doing it. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. And that's the biggest thing when it comes to showing up on multiple platforms. You're not creating new content for every single platform you're on. And if you are, that's why you're burnt out. That's why you're exhausted. That's why you're not enjoying the process. You should not be creating new content for every single platform you're on, but also creating new content for every single platform you're on. That creates a disconnect in your messaging. You want to create that cohesiveness. So, starting with that long form content, because it is a big piece of content, whether that's a podcast episode, a YouTube, I guess you call it YouTube video, YouTube episode, whatever, or a blog. There's so many good nuggets within those big pieces of content that you literally can pull them out and create other pieces of content for the other platforms you're on. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to create something new for every single platform you're on. And once you get that, once you understand that, you really can simplify your content creation process. You really can simplify this whole thing of being on multiple platforms. So, like I said, primary platforms for me, top priority are podcast, email, and then I'll put collabs up there too. Not a top priority, but will be one, hopefully in 2025, is blogging. Now, I guess you can kind of call it blogging my show notes, because I do essentially create, I don't want to say blog style because they're not super long. I used to do the blog style show notes and then that became too much, but I do have my show notes on my website and I do prioritize SEO. And so it does help with driving traffic to my website. But I am planning to get back to blogging in 2025. But I'm not going to do like how I was trying to do this year, where I was doing weekly blogs. Your girl don't have the capacity for that. So my goal starting in 2025 is to put out 2 new blogs per week. But again, it's going to be repurposing content. It's going to be digging deeper on specific topics, because with a podcast episode, I try not to make my podcast episodes that long. I'm not going to have these hour-long episodes because I know y'all don't have the time to sit down and listen to hour-long episodes. And I don't want to talk that long in a podcast episode. But I can dive a little bit deeper on specific concepts or ideas that I talk about in the podcast. I can do that in blog content. Okay, so in addition to that, I'm also on Threads and Pinterest, but I like to call these more of my razzle dazzle platforms. And what I mean by razzle dazzle is I sprinkle a little bit. These aren't primary platforms in that you will see me on them each week. On Threads, there are times where I am super active posting daily. And then there are times where I may not post anything new for a week or so. And it's one of those things where I do enjoy the platform, but then there are also times like when it's that time of the month where I just don't have the energy for it. I don't try to force myself to come up with content or anything like that. Even though it is like repurposing content, when it's that time of the month, my brain is just mush, and I'm learning to be okay and at peace with that because I still have email content going out each week. I still have podcast episodes going out each week. Like, I'm still marketing my business. I'm still selling my offers. And so the success of my business isn't reliant on Threads. With Pinterest, this is something in which it's connected to the podcast. Now, people say, you should be creating so many pins per piece of content and whatnot. But in this season of my life, I can only realistically do 2 pins per episode. That is what I have the capacity for right now. And it's working for me. Pinterest does drive traffic to my website. I've had about 3 or 4 pins go viral for certain blog posts that I wrote over the summer and everything, which has been great. But I don't focus heavily on it. Like, I'm not to a point yet where I really want to dive deeper into like a Pinterest strategy and creating more pins and stuff like that. So that's why I call it the razzle dazzle. Like it's just a little bit something extra that I do, but I don't focus on it heavily. I haven't made it a top priority. I haven't made it a primary platform. So you have to really figure out for you, what are going to be your primary platforms? And then look at everything else as something extra, something like if you have the capacity to do it, you do it. But even if you don't, it's okay because you have your primary platforms that are working for you. So, like I said, it can feel overwhelming, like trying to figure out how to show up on multiple platforms, especially as a mom. We have a lot on our plate. We wear multiple hats. We're momming, we're wifing, we're being a friend, we're trying to take care of ourselves, making sure we're eating healthy, exercising, getting in some self-care for ourselves. And then on top of that, we're running a business. Like we have the audacity to run a business too, right? And so then thinking about creating content can be overwhelming. And especially if you are, you feel like you have creative blocks or you're just trying to figure out, what do I actually post about? What do I actually talk about in my content and whatnot? And so when you simplify things, when you start with a long form piece of content, that makes it so much easier for you because you can repurpose. Like repurposing is such a good thing for mom business owners, especially one of the things that I have found with myself and even with my clients is that when we try to come up with content on the spot, it's stressful. And a lot of times it's stressful is because we're trying to come up with content or plan content when the kids are running around, screaming, yelling, playing loudly. And so we're overstimulated and we can't think clearly. One of the things that I had to learn as a mom running a business is that I cannot create from a place of overstimulation. Overstimulation blocks your creativity because you're stressed, your nervous system is shot, and you can't think clearly. And so you may get a little thought here and you want to take it and run with it, but the stress, the overwhelm, your nervous system being out of whack, you can't take it and make it a full thought. You can't take it and turn it into this amazing piece of content. So stop trying to create content when you're overstimulated. And I know that's easier said than done, but even if you, in the moment, if you're with your kids and you get an idea for a piece of content, quickly just put that thought in your notes app on your phone and come back to it later when you have a little bit more silence or your nervous system is relaxed. Like for me, that looks like at the end of the day, my husband comes home and, we have dinner. He gets the kids down for the night. I first go take a bubble bath to relax, to calm my nervous system. While I'm in the tub, I'm reading one of my books, one of my fantasy romance books, usually about fae. Some fae prince or something like that. And then after that, when I'm calm, when I'm rejuvenated, when my nervous system is relaxed, then I go create the content. Then I go plan the content, whether that's writing emails, whether that's, planning out podcast content or going and recording a podcast episode. My thoughts flow freely then. I'm in a relaxed state. I don't have anyone yelling, "Mommy, mommy, can I have some more graham crackers? Can I have applesauce? Cheese crackers, mommy. Mommy, what are you doing?" I don't have none of that going on. I love my babies, but the reality is that I cannot create content when I'm constantly being bombarded with questions or my little people, they need me. And it's nothing wrong with that. So I just wanted to share that there because I've seen it. Like, I'm thinking of a client in particular. We're launching her podcast, and she wrote like her script for her intro, her trailer, and then her podcast description. And there was like a disconnect because the first couple were like spot on perfect. Like I didn't have any feedback. And then the other one, it was just a total disconnect. And I asked her, like, what was going on when you wrote that? And she was like, my kids were running around screaming. I told her, do not try to script anything, write anything, create any type of content when you're overstimulated, because the results, it's not going to give what it's supposed to give. And so that's my biggest piece of advice here for you. Like, it's not that you can't show up on multiple platforms. 9 times out of 10, you're trying to create content while your kids are around, and it's not going to work. It's not going to work. I don't care what the experts say or anything like that. Like, if you're overstimulated, you're not going to be able to create good content. So anyways, off of that tangent or whatnot, when it comes to really, showing up on multiple platforms, like I said, content repurposing is going to be your best friend. And starting with long form content is going to help you so much. It's going to give you so much clarity in that, like, you're going to have this big piece of content that you can essentially pull from. And so that way, if you do want to post on Threads, or maybe you are an Instagram girly at heart, you are pulling from the long form content. You already have the idea concept there. Like, even you can pull from your long form content and, write out captions for a carousel and whatnot. Like, it makes it so much easier. And again, like I've already said, you do not need to create new content for every single piece of platform you're on. Like, every single platform you're on, you don't need to create new content. Like, that's stressful, trying to come up with something new for every single platform you're on. You don't need to do that. Like, repurpose the content. So you can repurpose your podcast content for emails. You can repurpose your, or your long form content in general for Threads, Instagram, if you're on TikTok, whatever. You can repurpose your long form content for a blog. Like, you can repurpose. And one of the things I want to say, like with repurposing, is it's not necessarily you literally taking word for word that piece of content and then posting it somewhere else. But like, again, just the concept or an idea. Like, maybe you mention this concept in your long form content that you want to dive a little bit deeper on just that specific concept. So maybe you turn it into a blog, or you write an email about it. Or maybe there was a line or something that you said in your podcast episode that would make a really good line to share on Threads, Like, again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I'm stressing this so much because at times we make it so much harder on ourselves, trying to come up with something new all the time. And you don't have to do that. Like, it's you talking about the same thing over and over again, but in new ways, highlighting it in new ways. And if you're worried that, people are going to know that you're repurposing content, if they're paying that close attention to your content, then they should be investing in your offers. But in reality is that people need to hear the same thing repeatedly. And they also need to consume it in different ways. Like, maybe they listen to your podcast, but it didn't click then. But then they read your email and then it clicks and it moves them to action. So I like to think of these different platforms as a way to create more touch points. Like I said, buying habits have changed. People need more touch points. The buyer cycle is longer. And so creating these avenues for them to get more touch points is going to help people move along the buyer cycle a lot quicker. But If you're only creating content for a single platform, I'm looking at you, Instagram, that is going to make the buyer cycle so much longer for you. You cannot go into 2025 relying on a single platform because you're going to see it in your income, in your sales, but also you're going to be stressed out, wondering what you're doing wrong, why people aren't buying and whatnot. When in reality, you need to create more opportunities for them to connect with you. And that's not just churning out more content on a single platform. It's looking at how can I spread this message across platforms? How can I meet people where they are? Because not everybody is scrolling Instagram. People love listening to podcasts. People love reading blogs. People love reading emails. People love watching YouTube videos. So spread your message. And this isn't to say you need to be on every single platform, but you need to be on more than one platform. And at the end of the day, long form needs to be part of that. And I will even say that email, like you need to have long form and email as part of that because email, you know that your message, your content is ending up in people's inboxes. Email has a higher return compared to social media. Okay, email, you actually can see who's clicking the links. And I say this all the time, but the reality is that you do not have time to waste as a busy mama. You need to know who your hottest leads are. In email, you can see that because the people clicking your links and going and checking out your sales page, those are your hottest leads that you can follow up with. Somebody clicks your link in your Instagram story, you don't even know who it is. So stop wasting your time and pour into the platforms that are actually going to give you a return where you actually can see the data and look at what's going on. This is why in the accelerator, I am going to teach you how to look at the analytics for both your podcast and your email so you know what the numbers are telling you because the numbers tell a story. Like, we do not have time to waste as moms. Like, we need to know what is working so that way we can hone on that thing and really create a wash, rinse, and repeat process for making sales in our businesses. Our time and capacity is limited. We do not have time to be guessing at what's working or hoping what's working. But when you understand your numbers, you can literally predict your sales. When you know your numbers, you get a true picture of your business growth. A lot of times you're assuming things aren't working, you're assuming you're not hitting your goals and whatnot, but in reality, you don't know because you don't know your numbers. Like, I've literally been able to hit my goals because I know my numbers. So, like, for instance, with the launch of the Social Media Detox Club, I was able to hit my goal and exceed it because I knew my numbers. I knew my conversion rate. I knew how many new leads I needed to get, how many people I needed to drive to my masterclass. And I was able to predict that I would at least hit my goal, but then I exceeded because my conversion rate increased. But I knew that because I knew the numbers. You do not have to guess at business, and you shouldn't be guessing at business. If you want to build a sustainable business, you need to understand the numbers. The same thing with your podcast. With my podcast, anytime I see a spike in downloads, I know I'm about to sign a new client because whenever somebody binges my podcast, I can guarantee anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, they are going to sign with me as a client. But if you don't know your numbers, if you don't understand what is going on with your podcast, if you don't understand what your podcast listeners want from you, you're not going to be able to do that. Like, business does not have to be a guessing game. It doesn't have to be something where you hope and pray that it works. And I'm not saying anything against prayer because I pray over my business all the time. But you can really look at the data and understand what the numbers are telling you and how you need to be moving in your business. And that is what we're going to do inside the Social Detox Accelerator. you are going to fully understand your numbers. So that way you can predict your sales. So that way you know what is actually going on with your audience. So you know where the gaps are, where you need to change things, where you need to tweak things and whatnot. So you know who your hottest leads are, who you need to be following up with. So if that is you, if that's what you want, if that's what you want to start doing in 2025, like stop playing around, but like get serious about your business, head on over to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/social detox to apply for the accelerator today. Now, if you have questions and if you aren't quite sure if this is right for you, I've included on the accelerator application a link to schedule a call with me, or you can send me a message on Voxer or on my DMs on Instagram, and we can talk about it and really figure out if this program is right for you. All right, Mama, that is it for this episode. I really hope you got a lot out of it. Like, if the main takeaway here is that you need to figure out your primary platforms, one of them needs to include long form content and content repurposing. Repurpose your content. Make it easier on yourself. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. All right, Mama, I'll catch you in the next episode. Well, Mama, that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to hang with me. If you enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a favor and follow the podcast and leave a review? Hitting that follow button and sharing your thoughts about the podcast are the best ways to ensure that other mamas like you find this show. Your review also lets me know if you're enjoying this podcast, so make sure to share your thoughts before you go. All right, Mama, I'll catch you in the next episode.